Hi, and welcome back to Preparing for PPA Certification. We're now on Section B of Composition and Design. Section B says, analyze the natural environment to complement subjects to achieve desired effects. Now there's 4 items from this section on the exam. Number 1 begins, knowledge of how to adapt the environment, understand the environment to achieve a photographic advantage, including items such as color harmony, patterns, subject placement, direction of lighting, distractions, and balance. Composition can be defined as the placement of the elements within the image. Now, as photographers, it's up to us to determine what's included in the photograph as well as what is not. Elements that we have to consider include subject, foreground, background, props, and the center of interest. Now, the elements of composition are really the tools that a photographer uses to design and tell the photographic story. Rule of thirds, balance, diagonals, repetition, pattern, leading lines, and framing are just a few of the tools that we have available in our photographic tool chest. Let's begin with color harmony. Just like in music, when individual notes come together to form a chord that provides us with a pleasing sound, so too do the color schemes within our image need to come together to provide a form of visual harmony that are pleasing to the eye. As we saw a little earlier in our study of the color wheel, groupings of light colors such as warm tones or cool tones tend to be harmonious. In this image, it uses a series of warm tones in the color palette to create strong visual harmony. In this image, I found the cool tones within the background and the perfect blue dress for the model to wear with it. Now, these things don't happen by accident. When you know the color values and the color schemes in a particular location, then you can prepare your client to wear the appropriate clothing and the appropriate outfits to be harmonious to the location that you're going to shoot. One of the outfits that this senior brought to the studio was this red top and her white skirt. I quickly went to work by putting a red gel on my background light and putting it onto my black background to turn my black background red. I then rolled up a couple of pieces of old seamless paper, taped them together on the back, and brought those in there as additional visual props. I thought the balance of the red and white props in the background worked perfectly with her red top and white skirt. Again, a wonderful image and wonderful color harmony. Next, let's talk about pattern. Repeating patterns give us the opportunity to create strong compositional interest. Repeated patterns in the background serve to set the subject apart from the background when you interrupt that pattern. Patterns also provide visual movement within an image. This bridal portrait works because of the strong repeating vertical patterns created by the columns in the walls, which are interrupted by the strong triangular composition of the bride in her dress. Now, sometimes you have to kind of change your camera angle just a little left, a little bit right, in order to pick up those repeating patterns. In this particular location, I see people photographing here all the time, and what they do is they shoot directly into the wall, almost like it's just a background behind the subject. But what I like to do is move off to the side and shoot down the length of this walkway, because when I do that, suddenly I start creating a diagonal movement throughout the image. As I shoot down the walkway, I start picking up the repeating patterns of the windows and the window sills and other elements within that background. Don't look at the world as flat and one-dimensional behind the subject. Look for ways of incorporating design and movement and pattern by changing your camera angle. Next, we're going to talk briefly about subject placement, but I want to begin with a discussion of the center of interest. You see, the center of interest is the focal point of your photographic composition. It might be an action, a person, an object, or even a location, but the center of interest is the reason for the picture. Let's take a look at a couple of examples here. In this image, we see the kids doing something, but the story is incomplete because it lacks the center of interest. They're looking at something, but the viewer has no idea what it is. When we pull back and see the entire image, now we see that the kids are reading a book, and it is the book that is the center of interest. So when it comes to placement of elements and subjects within your compositions, it's not always about the person that we need to place properly. We may need to place the center of interest properly. So in this example, we're utilizing the center of interest to fall within the rule of thirds. Now we're going to talk a lot more about the rule of thirds a little bit later on in our study, but just recognize that sometimes it's the person that you want to place, and sometimes it's the center of interest that you want to focus on. Next, we talk about direction of lighting. Now, we talked at length about this when we learned that we need to use the light to create texture and detail and to put the mask of light on the subject's face. When it comes to finding locations and venues where you photograph, direction of lighting is important because sometimes early in the morning provides you the best directional lighting for the location that you want to photograph. Other locations may be better late in the afternoon. There can also be seasonal changes to the direction of lighting, so a good study of light in the venues where you want to photograph would be important. Here's an example of using directional lighting coming from a window. Remember, in this image, the light is striking the bride as flat because it's not raking across her dress. When she turns away from the light source, now the light is able to rake across her dress, providing texture and detail. And then we turn her head back towards the light to create a really nice short lighting pattern on the bride. This is possible because this window did not face afternoon sunlight where direct sunlight would come through the window. I have to look for locations and look for windows when I'm on location that don't have direct sunlight coming in through them, because otherwise the lighting's too harsh and too contrasty. So again, knowing your environment, knowing what you have to work with, and knowing how the light's going to appear at certain times of day is a key part of your quest in finding the right venues. Next up, we talk about distractions, or more importantly, how to get rid of distractions. As you're viewing locations to photograph, keep in mind that sometimes your subjects may be standing, they may be seated, and pay attention to all of the elements in the surrounding area that could become a distraction in your images. Distractions may include unwanted highlights, hard shadows, or distractions in the background, such as cars and unsightly power lines, or backgrounds that may simply be too busy. Many of these distractions can be minimized by using a long telephoto lens and a shallow depth of field. In this image, the angle of view of the lens just gave me way too much detail and elements in the background that took away from the bride. By changing to a telephoto lens, I was able to eliminate the busyness of the background and really select the very best part of that scene. In this image, my lower camera angle included a horizon line that was busy and was frankly out of color key to the rest of the image. By getting up on a 3-step ladder, I was able to raise my camera angle and eliminate the busyness of the horizon and limit the scene to just that part of the image that complemented the bride. Next, let's talk about balance. Balance is created when all of the elements in the image are in visual harmony. Balance includes physical balance in relationship to weight and size, but it also includes balance in color. Let's take a look at two different types of physical balance, symmetrical and asymmetrical. Images which seem to create even balance left and right and top and bottom are said to be symmetrical in balance. Let's take a look at this image. It uses strong symmetrical balance as the elements on the left and right are practically mirror images of each other. Even the illuminated light fixtures add to the symmetrical balance of this image. In this image, symmetry is found in the windows on the left and the right. There's also a sense of balance created between the dark values of the fireplace and the dark values of the image on the mantel. The fireplace and the framed image also provide a sense of balance with their shapes. It's important to remember that symmetry in composition is passive, even if strong, because it does not create tension. Physical balance does not require the elements to be the same size, the same shape, or even symmetrical. Sometimes a heavy object may be counterbalanced by a lighter object, or a larger element may be counterbalanced by a smaller element. When this occurs, you're said to have asymmetrical balance. This image of the mittens in Monument Valley illustrates the concept of visual balance of an asymmetrical nature. Without the formation on the right, this composition would be heavily weighted on the left and therefore out of balance. Even though the formation on the right is much smaller, it occupies just enough space to provide visual balance to the image. In this image from the Outer Banks of North Carolina, the birds in flight create a nice asymmetrical balance with the old beach house on the left. Without the birds in this composition, the house weighs heavy on the left and the void sky on the right becomes a distraction. In this image, the shrub on the left creates nice visual balance to the dark windows on the right. With the shrub removed, the image becomes out of balance and your eye tends to go to that void area on the left where the bush once was. By having the bush in the image, then your eye tends to skip past both the bush and the windows because they frame the subject nicely. Well, that does it for Section B of Composition and Design. Now it's on to Section C. And by the way, a lot of you have written to ask me about the Christmas tree that's in the background. The truth is, that tree stays up year-round. That is my Beatles tree. It's decorated with mini CDs of all of the Beatle albums. So thanks for asking. I don't intend to take it down. It's been up in my office for probably 10 years. So I love my Christmas tree in my office. I love my Beatles tree. But thanks for asking.